Hey now, welcome to the Dirty Side of the Track, America's leading Formula One podcast. I'm Brian, that's Rob. Today was the British GP. I thought it was a great race. We'll get into it all, but Rob, welcome, man.
Yeah, thanks. No, really enjoyed today's race. I think as every race usually benefits from a safety car bunch up, today's did as well. But yeah, we'll get into that one later. But first off, got to give a shout out. I'm sure you watched the broadcast right from the beginning, right?
A couple minutes before the race started, so not too much more than that.
Oh, did you see the opening credits? Did you see the montage, the
I did.
Silverstone montage from? Oh my gosh, hats off to whoever edited that together. I was almost crying. That was amazing. That was such a good kind of talk about getting the hairs on the back of your neck standing up. That was such a good kind of historical review of Silverstone. It was amazing. That was just chef's kiss of an intro video. It was amazing.
The British guy enjoyed the British retrospective at the British Grand Prix. Shocker.
Shock horror, hey?
I don't remember them doing that for Miami. Where was the big Miami montage?
How are they going to go over the historical review of we've been here for 1 year?
Yeah. I was expecting something that involved a lot of this. None of it. It's all right.
No,
Americans always getting shorted.
Well, maybe once they've been there for 70 years, they can have one then, yeah?
Yeah, maybe.
Anyway, so yes, moving on. We will do news and social roundup. Then we'll do, like we always do, the review of the race. We've actually got 100 Seconds of DRS guest Jake on today as well, which is fantastic. And then we'll waffle about something at the end because we haven't got a race to look forward to next weekend, unfortunately. But, you know, there we are. We'll make the best of it. So, first things first in news and social. It's kind of it's not an apology because I'm not going to apologize for getting our episode out quickly, but because we were so quick out of the gate last week, we kind of missed out on the aftermath of penalty drama.
That was crazy.
Oh my gosh.
That was a bad look for the FIA and for Formula One to wait 5 hours to get the penalties out, or 4 hours and 51 minutes, but who's counting? That was ridiculous. And they just kept coming out. And I'm fairly certain Esteban Ocon was never once on the track.
It couldn't have been for that amount. I mean, I loved some of the memes that went around that showed the outline of the track map, and they said what the track looks like, and then someone like draws a squiggly line that misses all of the track and says what Esteban thinks it looks like. Little mean, but yeah, I mean that was crazy that like we recorded the episode thinking the result was one thing, and then it just got like trashed all over it. I do find it a little. I'm not going to go tinfoil hatty here, but everybody kept talking about Perez all the time during the race. People on team radio kind of like, has he not got a penalty yet? And it did look like he left the track a number of times. So when Aston Martin put this protest in, which by the way, apparently they spent a long time trawling over a lot of footage to make sure that they weren't going to get caught in this when they put that in. So, you know, kudos to them. They did their homework first and thought they were pretty clean. I was expecting Perez to get hit with retrospectives, but somehow Red Bull at the Red Bull ring came out all clean.
I'll get into that in a second in terms of count. But yeah, that was a shocker. And you have some updates on what they're planning on doing, right?
Yeah, look, we said on the episode, rules are rules, and that's what they said. The reason why they've never had a gravel trap there is because apparently, because it's used massively as a MotoGP circuit, that wouldn't be great for motorcycles, but they've had they've held council with the MotoGP now. They've all agreed on a solution that can go in, and they're going to have gravel traps at turns 9 and 10, so that next year we'll have natural track limits because you won't get an advantage by driving off onto the gravel. So unless you're Carlos Sainz, and then because he likes doing it,
he does love the gravel.
And before I hand over to your stats that you looked into on this, which is fantastic, I'm going to say that I actually feel sorry for them because. I have a game on the PlayStation, Grid Legends, and I was driving an open wheeler on the Red Bull Ring, of all things, this week, and I got done for track limits twice.
Did you really?
Yeah, on corners 9 and 10.
No way.
Yes. So, you know,
warnings
I'm up there
with times deleted or penalties. What happened to you?
They don't give out that strict penalty. Actually, it was like 1.5 seconds for each incursion, so I got 3 seconds overall, which is like nothing. Esteban would have loved that.
Esteban's laughing at you. 3 seconds. Come on, I got 10 times that. Yeah, no. So a couple of retroactive stat reviews here that we want to hit. SAP stats Austrian GP 1 week later, penalty debacle edition. Okay, so race control was tasked with reviewing more than 1,200 instances of cars reportedly exceeding track limits. Obviously, as you said, Aston Martin did their homework and put this appeal through, all of them at turns 9 and 10, by going all four wheels over the white line. And so for a 71-lap race, that works out to an average of 17 potential incidents per lap, with 60 infringements for each of the 20 drivers. They ended up doing all the homework, and they came out with 83 actual cases of track limit breaches. And there were two drivers, who did not exceed track limits. Can you guess them, Rob? And I know you're looking at the notes, but could you have guessed it without looking at the notes?
No, I couldn't. I would have just assumed that, it's George and Joe, but I would have thought George had for some bizarre reason. So when I looked at that, my first reaction was, crikey.
Yeah, blimey. Sorry. Yeah, I was surprised. And then Max and Fernando, I guess maybe I'm not as surprised, only had one instance each. Fernando, obviously, everyone talks about how technical he is and how accurate he was shooting for. And Max was, ahead. So he didn't, with the exception of those couple laps when Charles and Carlos had him after the pit. Charles and Valtteri, 2 instances each. And then in the 3 instances category where you got off without a penalty, the last group is Checo. So there he is. He had 3 instances of track limits, not enough for a penalty. Lando, Lance, Oscar, and Nico Hulkenberg. So interestingly, Lance and Fernando, both, as you said, in the non-penalty area. But now it gets a little fun. 4 instances, 5-second penalty, Magnussen. 6 instances, we're jumping up there, 15-second penalty, because if you remember, you get 5 at 4 instances, and then you get an extra 5. You get 10 at 5 instances, and then it resets. So your 6th is like you're back starting over again. You got a little leeway. So it's 6, which is the 5 and the 10, total of 15. We got Carlos, Lewis, Logan, and Nick. 7 instances, also 15, again, because you're back in the wiggle room area. You got Pierre. Now we're going to jump up a little bit to 9 instances of track limits. We've now circled the counter. We've gotten the 5 for 4 instances, the 10 for 5 instances, and now we're back around at another 4 for 5 more seconds, if you're following along at home. Albon and Yuki. And then a whopping 10 instances where you've loaded up all the penalties they can give as Esteban. It is noteworthy because he got a 5, a 10, and a 5 and a 10. Is the way it worked. He got 4 penalties, and so my last SAP stat is he broke the record for most penalties in a single race, breaking Pastor Maldonado's record of 3 in the process of never once touching anything inside the track limits, did Esteban.
Well, at least he came out of the weekend with a record.
That was when I read all that, I'm like, geez, they got to do something. If that happens again next year, I don't know if I can watch the track limit GP.
It won't with the gravel trap now, will it? So, It'll be self-policing, so that's cool. And talking about next year, what a great segue. The calendar is out. Initial thoughts on it? I mean, it was being billed as a more geographically organized calendar.
Yeah.
And it kind of is, I think, but they really only kind of switched 2 races around as far as they could see, and most stuff kind of stayed in its same order, which if the criticism of this year was that it wasn't that greatly organized, then they've moved 2 around, at 24, doesn't feel like a whole bunch of aligning going on, and there's some brutal back-to-backs I can't remember where it is now. I'm tripping over myself trying to remember, but there's some awful kind of long haul kind of out and backs as well. So I saw some of the reactions on Twitter and some from people like the working inside the sport kind of saying, this might be one where you have to start dividing and conquering between some of the guys that normally stay back at the factory and don't go to tracks. They're not going to employ a whole bunch of extra people because of the cost cap, but they might kind of do some, hey, well, you cover off these races and then you can come back to the factory and I'll go to those races instead. So what did you think about it?
No, you're right. I mean, it's moving in the right direction, I think. Baku was the flip-flop was Baku, which is usually up earlier, dropped back, and Japan, which is usually back later, came up forward. So you have an Australia, Japan, China run, even though those aren't in straight weeks. There's a week in between each. But the problem is, if I'm being totally honest, I get having you go from Monza to Baku where you're heading east, but then you continue to go to Singapore the next week and then back to the U.S. So like they made some headway, but there's a lot more work to go, I think, in terms of doing that. A couple races in the Middle East are on Saturday nights in the Middle East because of Ramadan. So, it felt like it was going in the right direction. But it is 24. Oh, yeah. It is 24, what they've always wanted. So if China happens now that they got rid of the zero COVID policy, and if we don't get washed out in Imola, I guess we might have 24 next year.
Yeah, we'll see. Well, this feeling that kind of 24 feels like a cursed number, and we're never going to get 24
tried a couple of times now.
Yeah, tried a couple of times. So bringing it back to Britain, being as we had Silverstone, there were 3 cars that had special liveries rolled out this week, but actually one of them, as Lee pointed out on our Discord, wasn't really a British GP livery, so maybe I'm going to cut them some slack here. But McLaren rolled out this. Everyone knew this Chrome one was coming. It was a nice tie-in with Google Chrome, going back to kind of the silver they've had in the past. I was really hoping for some of the mocked-up designs that had been floated around by some of the very talented people out there that can do those 3D modelings of like a proper, full-on Chrome. I knew there was going to be a bit of papaya because that's the colour scheme, but I was hoping for mainly Chrome. So I was a little underwhelmed when that one came out. It looked okay.
Yeah, I'd agree. The Williams one, which was was brilliant. I thought it was beautiful. I thought it was a great job by Williams. It was the flag on the back, and it was just fantastic.
Yeah, it was just simplicity. I mean, nothing like massively out of the way of what they normally run, but just the way the Union flag was on the back there was just fantastic. Aston Martin, I think I got caught up in the same misunderstanding that a lot of people did because they were being badged as a third team that had put out a new livery. And I looked at it, I was like, that's like playing spot the difference where there's like no difference between the two pictures. It's like, what the heck's that? So, but apparently it was because more that they were celebrating signing up a new sponsor, Valvoline maybe.
I think sure. It was.
Yeah, they put some like little flecks of red and blue somewhere, and just. Talking of launches, Reds launched this week, which is Zuckerberg's rival to Twitter, and it went mental. It's absolutely surged in the user base. So we made sure we got over there as well. I'm not sure you can. It looks like you have to have an Instagram account. We wanted to get on there just so that nobody else took Dirty Side of the Track because obviously it's a very sought after name. But the way they did it was you basically launch it from Instagram, so you get to keep the name there. So if you are on Threads, then check us out. It's a bit weird at the moment because it feels like I'm copying. At the moment, I've got the Threads app and Brian's got the Twitter one. And I'm just almost copying whatever Brian puts on Twitter from the Threads. But
is that what we're doing? I like that. That works.
It kind of feels like it's rocking at that. I might make you the Threads intern as well because then you can just like copy paste.
That's fine. So last week, if you were listening last week, Pitlane Paul had an excellent review from Austria, the Red Bull Ring, and he asked about DNFs. And because it just felt like we haven't had a bunch. And Paul said that'd be something good to look into. So Paul, we have another edition of SAP Stats, but this one's kind of exciting. So I'm bringing Slaphouse in for this one. Going full Slaphouse. SAP Stats DNF edition as requested by Pitlane Paul. All right. So
I think I'm sorry, but your SAP stats didn't match the Slap House enthusiasm. It was like you were so caught up in the Slap House.
I know, I forgot what to do. When it ended, I'm like, oh my God. For people on YouTube, you can see my face. Okay, so here's the research that I did on this. I started off trying to separate mechanical DNF from anything else because I think the question was really tinged with a mechanical point of view because it feels like we've had more reliability. However, in years past, it's really hard to get the differentiation between the two in like the last 60 years before this. You can, but then it's like you're splitting hairs. So what I did was started with cars that started the race and then saw the checkered flag or didn't see the checkered flag as the DNF. So mechanical crash, boredom, whatever, had to use the bathroom, it's a DNF. So the driver of this, in my mind, is we've had 2 races this year, Miami and Spain, where those were the 13th and 14th times in the 73 2.5-year history of the track where all the cars of the race, where all the cars started the race and crossed the finish line. 13th and 14th times ever in 72.5 years. So that's tremendous. That demonstrates how the reliability has improved. There was, interestingly enough, when you kind of start peeling this back even further, only one race without retirements before 2005, and it was the 1961 Dutch Grand Prix. So for, what is that, 55 years, we had one race where all the cars started and finished. And then we've had all the other 13 since then. However, as with any good statistician, it must be known that the statistical data is a little out, because the 2005 Indianapolis GP, that was where, if you remember, all the tire runners they were Michelins, they didn't race. So 6 cars started, all 6 ended. So I know
16 retired, because 16 retired.
But they didn't start the race. I went start and finish.
They didn't they? Didn't they do the formation lap or the start and then
they did the formation lap, but not the start.
Did.
They did not go to the starting grid. And then also, so I'm pointing out the imperfections. And then also in Spa 2021, if you remember when George got his miraculous second place, which we all forget about, at Williams, they ran 2 laps behind the safety car and counted it as a race. So again,
crazy.
That's technically in the 14. If you want to call it 12, you could. So, as I said, the 1984 season, before this sort of 03-04 period, I'll get more into that, had the most DNFs. In that season, of the 410 cars that started races, only 151 saw the checkered flag throughout the year. 63% of cars did not finish in 1984. That's the all-time high, but there were a lot of seasons kind of close to it. And what ended up really kind of driving some of the change is in 2003, when the Parc Fermé rules were introduced. What had happened prior to that is often teams would really kind of have a quali car and then redo it a bit for the race. And so by taking it apart and rebuilding it, using different components, you had less reliability because you were fiddling with things so much. You thought you could just fix it later, and often cars didn't finish as they tried to change from a quali perspective to a race perspective. And so there's actually a chart that I found from user Mick_312 on Reddit. And you can actually see in 2003, or after 2003, so 04, it just drops in terms of the number of DNFs. And the all-time low so far for a full season is 2021. 87% of cars finished the races they started. But like I said, there's a big drop. In 2002, there were 43% DNFs. And in 2005, there were 25% DNFs. So again, the change to the Parc Fermé rules really changed it. We had only one before that time period where one race or everyone finished. As I mentioned, it was the 61 Dutch Grand Prix. We've had a bunch since. But you may be saying, where are we at today, Sap? Tell me what's going on with 2003.
Where are we at today, Sap?
Exactly.
2023.
So here's where I did some extra math.
Oh, God.
We've had...
Paul, this is all your fault. This is all your fault for asking this question, Paul.
This season is actually leading that 2021 season. We've had 20 DNFs out of the 9 races. This is before today's British Grand Prix. 20 DNFs out of the 9 races. 9 times 20 is 180 cars. And the big driver is Australia. You remember that? And I remember this as I went through. I counted all the DNFs. They had 8 cars not see the checkered flag. It didn't help that Alpine ran into each other and everyone went off towards the end of the 4,000 red flags that were handed out. But that drove it up. So as of today, even with 8 DNFs in Australia, 20 so far up to the British GP, we have an 89% race completion rate, ahead of the 87%. And yeah, we saw some cars retire today, but I think we're in decent shape of making it happen. So Paul, I answered your question. We are seeing a big change. I hope that answered everything you were curious about. And for anyone else listening, I hope you enjoyed it as well. And now I shall take a break.
Stats you didn't know you needed to know, brought to you by Stats. Oh my gosh!
Actually,
wow! I see the steam coming out your ears with all the kind of the maths you were trying to do there. But
it was hard, man. That was a lot of work. But so I thought that was interesting, though. At least 2 of the races this year, right, where we've seen no DNFs at most out of 14 in the history of F1. But like you said, some of those you could kind of debate away. One last note before we go to the video vault. And Rob, I'd like your perspective on this. And actually, everybody, if you could send us a tweet at F1 Dirty Side, I'd really appreciate it. Last night, I was playing game night with my wife and one of our kids, and we played Boggle. And hadn't played Boggle in a long time. I actually forgot how the rules worked the first game, so I lost that one badly, and we played a couple more. And I put forth the word DEG, D-E-G. And as we were going through, my family said, "What's DEG?" I said, like tire deg. Like, degradation. And they said, no. I said, what? I said, I think deg is a word and it should be accepted. And they started laughing at me, maybe because I'd also had dev as a word before that. And they go, what's that for? I'm like, well, like the dev environment, like a development environment or a developer. And they go, you can't keep shortening all these words. I said, yes, I can. These are words. So, Rob, would you give me Deg and Boggle or no?
No, I wouldn't give you it in Boggle or Scrabble. You can't have if it's used so much in society that the Oxford Dictionary put it in as a word, and we can look it up and it says "deg," then fine. But I'm pretty sure it's not there. So how about we maybe even edit that part out and don't even talk about it again and open up the video vault?
Deg is definitely a word. All right, time for the video vault. The vault is opened. Let's see what we have.
Sound effect! Wow.
Even no one for
Do it again. Do it again.
Well, the door's open. You want me to close it first?
I don't care. Just
we'll close the door.
wow, it's a lot more dramatic when we close the video vault than when it opens.
Yeah, it's easy.
I mean, that's a screen door, like front gate or something
Yeah.
that needs a bit of WD-40. When it closes, it's like the world is ending.
Yeah, it's a vault. Yeah, that's so. It's 4 videos. We'll go quick. The moment Nigel Mansell was reunited with his iconic Williams on the Sky Sports F1 channel. It's 2 minutes. Apparently, it was sort of an advertisement, or as Rob would call it, an advertisement for a documentary on Sky Documentaries, and it was kind of neat. Like, it was fun to see Nigel get into his old car. He said the seat had gotten smaller, and then one of his original team members said, or you may have gotten larger, and that made me laugh. His mustache game was tight, but if you don't have 2 minutes to spare, you don't have to watch it. And if you want to see the documentary, it apparently just dropped today on Sky Documentaries. I'm going to talk about this one for a second, but then I'm going to let Rob really highlight it. The Lollipop Man from last week, recapping the Austrian GP. Oh my God, it was great. I thought it was one of the best ones yet. Did you agree? Where are you at on that?
I do, but I think part of the joy of watching Lollipop Man, is not knowing the jokes ahead of time. So I'm not going to spoil it. Just watch it. This guy is getting better and better, I think, with each passing week. So, because I think we'd said the one before was like one of the best ones we'd ever seen, and this one just raises the game again. So,
and you have to stay after the credits again. There's a scene after the credits again. It's so good. And Lee on the Discord also loved it. Thought it was one of his favorites too. So I'm with you, Lee. The AlphaTauri channel. Which GPs from the past would you race again? Behind the visor with Yuki. Yuki's been in the Formula One situation here for a year and a half, 2 years tops. So he doesn't have all that many to go back and rerun. It was 2 minutes. I'd pass. You didn't learn anything. It didn't gain anything. But the one that you have to check out, I promise, this is the one, the Ultimate Gunther Steiner Meme Challenge. It's 11 minutes on the Sky Sports F1 channel. Not only was it great, not only does he talk about other team principles, not only did it make me laugh, they also addressed what happens when an engine explodes. What does he do to the engine supplier? How did the engines work today? How did Magnussen's engine go today? So I'm thinking we know what Gunther's going to do and what face he's making. But anyway, I don't know if you saw it, Rob. If you haven't,
I didn't, but
please add it to your list.
You've got me intrigued. And like I said to you, when I do the show notes, I kind of have some of them running as I'm editing the show. So I will make sure I start with that one. I probably won't bother watching Yuki's 2 minutes of nothingness. Right.
Closing the door.
Okay, the main...
You asked for the sounds. I got to... It's heavy. All right, closed.
It's a lot windier outside when we're closing the vault than when we open it as well. But, okay, right. Race week, rolling up to Britain. So a quick run through practice, because actually there wasn't a lot more in it, and we had a lot of good stuff to talk about in quali in the race. So FP1, I'm going to say main event was a bin bag that was blown around the track and caught a few drivers out by surprise, thinking it was something bigger or a dead animal or whatever it was. Not a lot really happened. They just talked about the weather a lot, and we saw Brad Pitt's car out on track, which actually looked pretty cool. And it kind of looked like the Rich Energy car and the John Player Special car got together and had a baby.
I'll buy that.
FP2, the big conspiracy theory hit the grid as Bonotto was spied in the paddock, and at that moment Charles had an electrical issue and didn't have any running. So did anyone see Bonotto messing around at the back of Charles's car?
Question.
Not sure. Williams put some decent pace in, and we're all getting a little bit excited about them. And FP3 just got a little bit rain disrupted, and kind of felt sorry for the fans. Really, there wasn't a huge amount of running on FP3 as we could have seen.
The thing for me, I just saw McLaren was looking good, but we had seen Lando with pace in Austria, and then they were saying they were bringing Piastri's upgrades this week. So I was excited to see what happened in the race. It was a Williams that shocked me through
Yeah.
practice. I
Yep.
walked out of practice, like the notes, the highlights, thinking, oh my God, did Williams figure something out? Are they going to be battling Mercedes and Ferrari? Is this a possibility? I was so pumped for Williams. I almost went with Logan and Alex and Williams constructor on my fantasy team. Now I didn't, thank God. But I almost did. I was that into it. They had me sold, hook, line, and sinker.
Yeah, I mean, obviously hindsight's an amazing thing, so we can look at this and kind of say, well, were they running real light or quali type runs in practice and put themselves up, whereas other people were doing longer, more race pacing? I mean, didn't do. We'll get there. They didn't do badly in the race. They just didn't light it up in quali like I thought they were going to after the practice stuff. So
They did well, but just not as
they did.
good as I
Yeah,
was
yeah,
thinking
exactly.
they would do.
So quali, turn on the TV, and the first thing that hits me is that we've got a mixed grid of inters and slicks because the rain had stopped and the track was kind of, well, the way they said it, oh yeah, we've got like changeable conditions, and the camera panned out and showed Silverstone from above. And I'm like, well, that's dry. None of those inters runners are going to stay out running on inters, and lo and behold, Ferrari go out on inters because guess what? Ferrari make a silly call again, and Charles comes straight back in immediately for slicks.
Basically, I was waiting for this exact message from last year.
Wait, what are these tires?
Sorry, it's a mistake.
I mean, that was it. I mean, as you and I were trading notes, why is Ferrari on inters almost all alone? Oh man, you know what? We go out for Q1 and they're doing a focus lap on Lewis, and it's cool. I'm watching it. I always love when they watch one car go all the way around the track, but I love it even more when that one car has a problem and you see it live. And it's not like you're just watching it occur. And then all of a sudden, and they had a great camera angle going for Lewis, he starts spinning. And I can't tell how far he's going into the gravel because of the angle. And I'm worried he's going to hit the wall. And then they kind of show a different angle. He just barely went off the track. He touched a little bit of gravel, kept it going. You could see him hitting the gas. But you realize at this point, it's going to be important to get your lap in, a banker lap, if you will. But pushing it, but not going over the limits. And it was interesting to see what happens after that.
Because it was classic British rubbish rain. It was rain that just kind of ruined your day. If you had planning a day to the beach or something, it's enough rain to ruin that, but it wasn't enough to actually make the track inters wet. It was just that kind of light drizzle, which meant it was greasy. And to your point, Sat, they had to work out how hard they could push it, especially through the fast corner combination where there was a lot of twitchy. There was an onboard, I think it was Saints. Are we going to carry that going all the time?
No one will know what we're talking about at some point.
I know. If you didn't listen to the Canada episode, at some point we're going to have to go back to science. Anyway, there was a couple of, it might have even been Alonso, there's a couple of proper catches where he had to kind of correct it from almost going off. So yeah, I do like that kind of slippy situation. But then
Magnussen. Speaking of Canadian pronunciations, Magnussen loses power. But he really had some power problems this weekend. Loses power, red flag, 3 minutes, 11 seconds left. And we realize the track is drying. It will get rubbered in as more people come out. It's going to be a one-shot quali. And it was like really exciting to watch this happen.
Yeah.
And
if people don't know what people are on about when they talk about like Alonso's bid, kind of pushing forward the idea of going back to the one-shot quali where every driver gets to go out, no traffic, TV people are happy because everyone's sponsors get the same amount of airtime. This was an advert for it because this was one-shot quali basically. There was, I was a bit confused to see Perez waiting at the end of the pit lane to go out first. Like you just said, it's drying. And it's evolving, which means the later people to go out are probably going to get the faster times.
Agreed. And so we lose K-Mag, Nick, Joe, and Yuki, and Checo. And it is the 5th straight failure to progress to Q3 for Checo. And I just want to highlight a quick deep dive here, if we could. It's the new deep dive sound. I had too much time on my hands last night. And so as the clock hit 0, right, and the checkered flag comes out, and trust me, this was not a checkoed flag. As the checkered flag comes out at 0, he is actually first on the leaderboard. So I went back and rewatched what happened to him because I was curious later on in the day. He was actually top of the tables when it goes to 0. So it evolved so much that he went from hero first to 16th over the course of the next minute and 20 seconds as other cars came around.
Yep.
That is, so it's as much it's as much on him as a little bit at this time on the team for having him out there so darn early when the track was evolving. You don't want to be first at this situation. You want to be towards the tail end. Why was he sitting on the pit lane for 8 minutes when they thought the red flag was going to end? I don't understand that, and it totally hosed him. But you cannot miss 5 Q3s in a car that is pole position and winning every race.
Yeah.
That's on him. I mean, I'm sorry. That is. I love Checo, and I'm really struggling to figure out how to defend him at this point.
I mean, we've said before on this here pod that do they put Ricciardo into De Vries's seat and give him half a season to see what he can do to light a fire on Checo, and then if Checo doesn't bring home the bacon, then they move Danny. I do not see them dropping Checo halfway through and putting Ricciardo in there. I just don't see that happening. I think Danny Rick needs to prove that he can actually still do it. But
I thought that was
it's not
rubbish, but now
Checo
it's looking
right
real
now.
good. That's looking like a real possibility.
Yeah. So then the sun's out for Q2. No real rain on the horizon. And last week I made a big claim. I went with Hart and I said Max to win, which was obviously the banker. But then Lewis and George on the podium, which we will definitely come back to later. But Lando is out there surprising everybody, throwing that McLaren around the track like it is a world beater. It was amazing to watch. I loved it.
That was unbelievable.
Brilliant.
It was so great to see that happening. And again, we did have, partway through, we had Alex in the top 5 as well. So a lot of the things we thought were going to happen were kind of starting to happen. But then we got the real laps coming through. We lost Valtteri, who had that power issue at the end of Q1. We lost Logan, we lost Esty Bestie, and Lance, who kind of had their own little kerfuffle trying to get their last laps going. Lance, by the way, did not acquit himself well this weekend. He looked a bit like a ham-handed doofus. And then Hulkenberg, we lost as well. So Max topped Q2, followed by Oscar and Lando. Holy crap. And then Alex and Carlos. And you look at this list of people: Max, Oscar, Lando, Alex, and Carlos. At this point, I'm showering in joy. Just put this right in my veins. Teams that hadn't been anywhere 2 weeks ago are everywhere except Max. And we'll get to that in a second about Max, what ends up happening at the end of qualifying. But then they turn on DRS for Q3. And both of us, maybe it's because Rob rants about it all the time. Rob, let me help you out here. I'll do this for you. You can actually you can stand down. Why do we need DRS in quali?
Yeah.
It's for when you're 1 second behind the car in front of you in the race. What does it have to do with quali? There's no one around you, and you just get to use it?
I don't know.
Wouldn't it be more fair if everyone didn't have it?
Yeah, this isn't even my actual DRS rant. I just fundamentally don't get it. The same as you. I don't see why it's needed in quali. And who knows? The fact that Red Bulls is so much more efficient is maybe what gets those 2/10. Anyway, let's not get ahead. But anyway, so Max just goes out there, DRS enabled, puts an absolute monster up on the clock.
Fresh tires.
And I'm fresh tires.
Yeah.
DRS enabled, and I'm like, well, that's that then, because that DRS is so efficient. The extra speed he's going to get, I don't see the others clawing it back. And then all of a sudden,
Lando gets fresh tires.
I was going to say, I'm pretty sure that my eyes are deceiving me at this point. Lando goes and pops it on the top, and I'm like, holy... Can't say what I want to say because we don't want to get the E rating on this pod, but holy that. I was like, Lando's going to get pole. He's absolutely going to get pole. But then Max comes back round the corner again and took it back. I mean, it wasn't by much. 2/10, I think, which actually probably is a country mile in Formula One. But, oh, man, that kind of showed me that car had got real pace in it, that McLaren. It was...
Max, Lando, Oscar again, Charles... Carlos, and this will be the last time we have anything good to say about Ferrari, but don't worry.
We'll come back to you.
And so then we had George, Lewis, Alex, Fernando, and Pierre. Wow. The Lando thing. When Lando crossed to take provisional pole towards the end, and you knew Max was still coming around, but he also, if you remember, once again, like in Monaco, he did not have purples. Max actually had a green and a yellow sector. And you're thinking, once again, like Monaco, there's no way. And he puts in a sector 3 for the ages, takes the pole position. But the sound of the crowd for Lando coming across as pole, I think I heard that here in Chicago, straight from Silverstone. It wasn't on my TV.
That was amazing.
That was amazing. And then I loved the interviews at the end. I've talked we both enjoy, I think, Lando and cheer for him, and just would like to see him in a good car. Sochi 2021 still breaks my heart. I watch it regularly, and it hurts. But during the interview, when he said this,
it's always Max. He always ruins everything for everyone, you know.
I thought that was so good. I'm saving that sound clip for whenever anything else happens with Max, that he ruins everything for everyone. A few thoughts I had. Oh, sorry, go ahead, Rob.
No. I loved it. I felt sorry for Max a little bit because there was a little bit of booing going on earlier on, which I'm like, just leave that at home.
Yeah.
I get you don't want to cheer for him, 100%. But actually, it was nice to see him and Lando. They're obviously good friends. A little bit of banter. Max was loving it when he was blaming him and saying Max ruins everything. It was that was really nice. Actually, I kind of enjoyed that interview.
I did too.
Sorry, go on. Your post-quali thoughts.
Yeah, boy. Oh man, when we looked at the rookies coming in, we kind of hoped that Piastri would have something, and we figured he might be all right. We thought Nick would be okay with all of his experience. He'd have something to show. I think I'd even said Nick would outpoint Yuki in the AlphaTauri, and we weren't sure about Logan. Like, that was our big question mark. At least for me, was my big question mark.
Well, I agree with that.
Turns out we're wrong, right? Piastri is doing just fine. He's been behind Lando, and he's been learning. But you don't put in laps like that he did this weekend in quali in the race without serious talent. Logan was up there today, not too far behind Alex, who I think most people would say is getting everything and more out of the Wish.com Williams steering wheel and the flat floor from, the kids' play bin. Logan's doing pretty good. Nick, on the other hand, continues to have problems. Just it's one after the other. And I think I'd said earlier this year, his was the seat that I saw changing, the highest probability. Now I'm 100% sure. He better rent, not buy, because whatever he's doing, it ain't going to last long. It's not working, and it's brutal because I really wanted him to have success, but I just don't see it. I mean, what do you think?
No, I mean, we've said this numerous times that Nick de Vries is not covering himself in glory, and it's a lot more difficult for him to get away with that inexperienced rookie card just because of his age as well, I think. Yes, he's technically a rookie to the F1 grid, but in theory, he's got an older head on those shoulders, and he should actually probably be wiping the floor with the other two rookies. I think Logan is growing into it. He started off looking real bad and was always trundling around at the back. Last two races now, he's been knocking on the door of points.
Yes.
So he seems to be pulling it together. So, yeah, you got to feel for de Vries because I can't see him lasting in that car.
I can't either.
I just can't.
I can't either, unfortunately. And then Checo, we hit this briefly, but there's no way in the same car as Max, who's won 11 races, or whatever the number is for Red Bull, and all the wins and podiums, and we'll get into the stats in a second. 5 races in a row, 5 Max poles. 5 races in a row, 5 Checo misses Q3.
Yeah,
it's
not a good look, is it? It's
It can't get more stark a difference than that.
For all those people out there that say it's just the car, let's take a look.
Yeah,
I mean, the evidence is suggesting that it's not.
Oh, man. God, it's getting hard to be a Checo defender. And then one or two last things. I'm actually going to go with the last one in our notes here so we can talk about the third one. Albon came out. Planet F1 had some reporting, and thank you to listener David for sending me this. Planet F1 had some reporting that he had a bloody back at the end of qualifying, so much so that the commentators noticed it through his fire suit, at least through his shirt underneath it, his fire shirt. It's disgusting if I show you my back, he said. I've got lumps and bumps everywhere. I think because I'm tall, and to get into the car and position properly, I'm basically rounding my shoulders and my bones stick out. Seriously, through corners like Maggots and Beckett's, it sounds disgusting, but I can feel my skin ripping as I go through the corner. What?
Can we just move on and talk about the next thing? I don't like the sound of that at all.
But we had to address that. That is gross and horrible, and I feel bad for Albano. So anyway, go to the next one.
Well, this is kind of more yours. You said Aston have been caught, just like you predicted. And I'm like, well... And then you said just like Haas from last year. And that was a lot more of a kind of a fall away. Whereas, don't know that we can say that Aston have been caught yet, really. They kind of said before they came into today's race that Silverstone wasn't going to be a good track for them. And they've had a couple of other... They had like Spain, which was one that they knew wasn't going to be good for them. But if you actually look at Fernando, his best results have come in the last... Forget today for a minute, but he was third, fourth, third, right? So those are the first 5 races of the season.
Amazing.
In the 4 that was since that, he's had 2 second positions on the podium. So he's got better other than the two tracks that didn't suit, so Spain and today didn't suit the car, so he was further down the grid. On the tracks that have favoured them, he's done better than he did at the beginning. So I think it's a little early to say it's the death of Aston.
Yeah, but you're blaming it all on the track. I'm saying it feels like other teams have made a move up. And I'm not saying they've fallen back, but I'm just saying they haven't moved up as well, right? They shot their big shot, and they keep looking for the next one, and they may not have found it. And so... So I
still think Aston are probably... I think we'll see a different race car from them next time around. In Hungary? I just think they've and the same thing that I worry that we won't see the same McLaren next time around, because if you remember, I don't know, however many episodes back, and you probably don't because you don't listen to a word I say, but Zach Brown said that McLaren had seemed to have focused in on where they were losing performance on the car, and it was to do with when they lift off the accelerator into slow corners where you don't need to brake hard and don't need to accelerate hard, and that kind of middle corner. Silverstone doesn't have any of those. So I want to be excited that McLaren are back and they're going to take the charge every week, but we've just got to temper this a little bit that I think that they're back, baby.
I'll say this. So, like, I do believe Aston is being caught, and I don't think they're going to be as competitive. Like we had bad qualifying from them here last week too. Fernando finished 7th, as you said, but Lance finished 14th. And so, I look at that and I just don't think the car's as fast as the people around them, or at least the people who had been around them. I would love to see McLaren be real. What part of it is now I feel bad. I made this big Alpine prediction and they looked great for a while. In the last couple races, they felt very mediocre and they can't finish. Yeah. And I got Lance running into the gas man, knocking his wheels sideways and only getting a 5-second penalty, but we'll get to that. Anyway,
let's get to the race.
Let's do it.
Let's
go.
Hurry up for the race. So, I thought it was an absolute shocker of a decision, and it just shows how much I know about this sport, that George, with the position that he'd got in qualifying, which wasn't a bad one that he needed to recover from, started on the softs. I was looking at that and went, oh my gosh, someone's been sipping from the crazy juice here, because even the commentary team was saying softs are probably only going to last about 10 laps, so he's going to really have to hope for a good getaway, make some moves, and then make hay while the sun shines. Turns out commentary team were wrong as well. But
and one other car in the top 10, 15 or so also had a different strategy. It was Hulkenberg, and he started on hards. And you're like, oh, Haas is gambling. They're going to go late and hope for a safety car late and save some position. And we'll talk about that too, because that also didn't work the way anyone thought it was going to go. But then, we get the start. First of all, when they left for the formation lap, I thought that was when we were going to see Sonny Hayes, Brad Pitt.
Not chance.
No, that was the installation lap, apparently. I got that wrong. So I showed up early to watch them go around like, where the hell's Brad Pitt? And I screwed that one up.
He was never going to be allowed out in the formation lap. I don't know why the Twitterverse suddenly thought that was going to happen. Can you imagine what would happen if Brad Pitt bins it on the way round in the formation laps and into Max? There's just no hope in hell that was ever going to happen. Yeah. But anyway.
A great start. And
oh my God, lights out and away we go. Yeah. And Max does not get off the line well. And
as Fernando has said a lot this year.
And chrome all over him.
And Fernando has called it many times when we've had Fernando second. He said sometimes Max doesn't have the best starts. Well, finally someone took advantage of that, and it was Lando, and Max goes to cut him off, and I think was probably a little surprised to find he didn't even have a mirror of Lando. He had side of Lando. They were equal as Max is cutting across, and Max is like, crap, I guess I can't run him off into the bushes because he's already there.
Yeah, and then Oscar, I thought, was going to get him as well because he got right up alongside him. But fair play to Max. He just kept his foot planted and went the long way around on the outside of the corner actually we heard it in the cool-down room afterwards where they saw it behind him on the screen. He said, I just kept on it and just hoped that he didn't understeer into me.
Cool-down room is so great. And then they the commentators quickly come across with the fact that Lando hasn't led a lap since Sochi 2021. And then they say it looks like it's going to rain here. I'm like, no, please, no, don't let that happen to Lando again. My guy, don't do it. Anyway, a bunch of cars went off at turn 3 on the first lap. I quite honestly missed all of it. I didn't care. I was so focused on the Lando Max Oscar battle.
Well, Lewis went wide, right?
He lost a bunch
they
showed in replay this. Lewis went off, and a bunch of people went off too on turn 3. But I just was so zeroed in on this McLaren Max battle. And I'm like, this is what we've needed. And it was great until DRS was enabled. And DRS is too strong on the Red Bull. I didn't think it was too strong for a lot of other cars. There were a couple DRS passes, but not a ton. Not like other races. There were a lot of overtakes in corners, as often happens because they're high-speed corners at Silverstone. But, man, once they turned DRS on, he just shot right
I
past
know,
him. And then
I know.
that
There was
it.
one point when Lando was kind of pulling away, and I thought, oh, maybe he'll just break it and he won't get. But then because Max is in that rocket ship, he's going to get back into DRS. And I would have just loved to have seen how Max would have got him eventually. I'm sure Max would have got him, right? But I think it would have taken a bit longer, and we would have seen some epic attack and defense going on. But you've said it for me. I'm not going to talk about DRS. I'm going to move on. So,
yes, this is our best episode yet.
Because I'm not moaning about DRS because you did. So it's better when you moan about DRS than me. Is that what we're saying?
Yeah, I'm trying to do it for you so people don't have to hear you rant again about it. And I do it quicker and faster, and we move on. By lap 6, we had only a 9-second spread amongst the top 10. It was tight. We had battles. We had Leclerc, Russell, and Sainz in a group right behind the McLaren duo with Max. It was actually around the time that we'll stop talking about Ferrari because they really didn't work out for them.
We'll check that.
Alonso, Hamilton, and the gas man in a group right behind him. It was great. Hamilton got Fernando on the Wellington straight, and then we had Ocon retire. But again, I felt like we were all pretty much in groups of cars battling each other, getting tasty into corners where they were trying to see if they could poke a wheel or a nose up the inside, or even some trying to go around some outsides.
What I was really surprised by, so what are we, about 10, 11, maybe 12 laps into the race right now?
Yeah.
I was actually surprised at how it was Max, Lando, and Oscar disappearing into the distance. Yes, Max was starting to build a bit of a gap. There was like a 2-second gap or whatever it was. But McLaren were not falling back into the clutches of anybody behind them. They were making a big gap for themselves. And that took me more by surprise than anything else because I honestly thought, I hope McLaren do well. But I kind of thought maybe they'd blown all their load on the qualifying day, and they were going to get eaten up by the pack behind them. But not at all.
They were pulling away from
awesome.
from the Ferraris, and listen, George, and we had team orders going on, which made sense at this point. Like I hate team orders normally, but would you want Oscar battling Lando for the second position so early in the race when they're trying to conserve tires and pull away from the Ferraris and the Mercedes and trying to stick on Max's bumper? It doesn't make sense to waste that time at that point.
If Oscar had been like ridiculously quicker and had a chance of going and chasing down Max, fine, but he didn't. He was marginally quicker than Lando at that one point. He seemed to have switched his tires on a bit quicker. But no, I agree with you. It just made sense. Then we got a whole bunch of will we, won't we rain. We had reports of it already raining in Brackley, and one of the teams had said we're going to get light drizzle in 5 minutes to last for 5 minutes, and other people are going, no, the wind's blowing the other way, it's all gone. It was just good old-fashioned English weather not making its mind up. And we're already now at the point where people are already starting to get surprised. I think we might have traded some notes on WhatsApp, and maybe we've got some coming later, where George is still out there. We're like at about 15, 16 laps in at the moment.
And he's
people
getting
are
close
going,
to Charles.
Yeah. So what happened to these 10 laps of life from the softs? But yeah, absolutely.
And so, like we said, we had George on the softs at lap 17 trying to get at Charles. We had Checo making moves. Over this point of the race, there weren't a lot of overtakes happening anymore, but Checo was making some overtakes. Again, that DRS is very powerful on the red. And then we got the first pit stop, and I loved it. It was great. Like, what we decided was, hey, Ferrari, wouldn't it be great if we decided to pit incredibly early and put on some hard tires? And they sent Charles in, and they're like, hey, Charles, do you want to pit 10 laps before anybody else?
Question?
And so he did off the mediums, and they put on the hards, and he sat in 12th forever. I don't even remember who he was behind. We'll get to that in a second. And I'm like, why did that happen? And no one else pitted. They're all like, too early. George is out on soft still, and they brought Charles in.
This is what I didn't understand. You've got a huge case that you can look at here of there's George running happily on softs, catching cars in front of him, not falling apart. So you're on mediums, so why don't you maybe think about if this is a one-stopper, let's see how far the mediums can go, because as soon as you've got tipped over the halfway point, then you might even be into a mediums to soft, which like most the grid did in the end. I'm like, Ferrari, what are you doing? You got it all. Everyone got all excited in Canada because they actually got their strategy right to make the best of a weekend that they hadn't done for ages. That's it. They've used up their one final fix or whatever from the fantasy of that. That was it. That was their one shot at being good decisions for a week. But,
Two more quick pit stop notes. Max sees Charles pitting on TV and asks about it. He's that bored out front. He once again is like Fernando, right? They pointed this out in commentary, seeing stuff happen. on TV. And I forgot to talk about Hulk because he'd pitted at this point. He'd had front wing damage and had to pit early from his hard tires. So it was pointless putting the hards on the Haas to start the race. They could have started on softs. I know the hindsight of losing an end plate on your wing is 2020, but just when he came in, I'm like, oh, nuts. Like it completely undid every lick of strategy that they were going for. So that was painful. And then you already mentioned this, at this point, by lap 24, hardly anyone was in DRS, but it was still pretty close. Second or two, team to team. We had all 6 in the bottom coming from Alpha, and Haas, which just shows the pace wasn't there for those teams. And I made, again, tires. Sorry, Rob.
That's okay.
If George's tires are still going, they're still going, I think the compounds needed to be softer. We had the C1, 2, and 3. C1 is the second hardest tire, and then the 2 following it. We had 2 softer compounds that they did not choose to use, which would have degraded. They would have had higher deg, a word for boggle, and they would have had higher deg and had to make different choices. Instead, we have George out there going over half the Grand Prix on softs that they said would only last 10 laps.
Yeah, I think they did make the wrong call there because we've enjoyed recently the variety we've seen in pit stop strategies. The first 4 or 5 races were all boring one stoppers, and I don't want to see that coming back. So yeah, I think they picked the wrong ones there. And those our tyres just seem to be like the rocks. Was Silverstone last year when Charles came out on hard rocks and went backwards?
Yeah.
So
it took Charles 7 laps. It took him 7 laps to get Lance. 7 laps on those hard tires. It doesn't take that long for them to fire up. If Charles pits in the woods and there's no one there to hear it, does it make a noise?
What?
Exactly. And so Carlos then saw this happen. He finally said, oh, this is great. And by Carlos, I mean his team. Box on lap 27. 27 of 52. We're over halfway now. George still out on softs. Box, Carlos. Let's go on to hards as well. Because it took Charles 7 laps to get Lance. So we'll see how you do on these things too. Why?
What I don't get as well is Carlos was being very kind of adamant on the radio up until the point that he wasn't, because he was like, tell me the rundown. What's everybody else on the rundown?
Exactly.
Give me details. I'm like, okay, so he's going to process all this and then he's going to make his tyre call. So they gave him the details of what was happening and they went, so what do you think? And he went, it's your call. Why get so angry to demand to know what everybody else is on and then just fold and just go, yeah, give me whatever you want? And then when they did give him the hards, he's like moaning that he's on the hards. And like that bit where you were doing all the big showmanship thing about tell me all the tyres, if you wanted to go on to something else, that might have been the moment to say it. But
well, he asked
never mind.
what is everyone on, and instead of getting this,
We'll come back to you.
they actually gave him some of the answers, and then he's like, I don't know what to do with this info.
You don't normally give me details, so now I'm a bit confused.
And then, so Rob and I are sitting there thinking we're tire whisperers, saying, why would anyone go to the hard tires? And we see McLaren come out. First of all, George finally comes in, goes to the mediums, had a slow stop, which did cost him a position on the track. And then we see the McLaren garage bringing out white striped hard tires. And I immediately write into the notes, why would you do that? And what they don't talk about, this is around lap 27, 28, 29, 30. What they don't talk about is at this point, Checo comes into pit as well. And he's coming back from 10th or so, give or take, when he pits. And he goes to softs. And no one talks about it. But I saw it happen, and I said, Hannah, the strategy genius at Red Bull and I are on the same page. We knew you had to go to soft tires. Rob was there with us. I don't know the hard, and the hards didn't turn out to be a disaster for every team, just Ferrari. But yeah, man, I was shocked by that. We had everybody else coming in basically went to softs at this point.
Yeah, everybody kind of, once you crack the back of going past halfway, then it seemed, and everybody's also seen what George is doing on the softs. I mean, I think even if people had been thinking of a medium hard or hard medium, whatever, it's like, well, no, the softs are going to last. So let's just do it. We had then George was starting to look a little bit racy. He put a real nice move on Leclerc, although now in hindsight, was that just Ferrari going backwards or was it George going forwards? I'm not sure.
Good question.
And then Stroll and Gasly came in and went to the softs as well. So now everyone's doing the same thing that Red Bull have done, is going for a stint on softs. And then any debate about whether they would last. got nerfed by Magnussen being on fire, because now we were going to get a few slow laps behind a safety car, and those softs were definitely going to make it to the end. So much so that Charles decided to pit again. Like,
Under
he'd
the
had enough of
VSC,
these. Yeah,
right. And so they pit
under the VSC, he'd had enough of those hard rocks.
pit under the VSC, and I'm sure they said, "Hey, Charles, would you like to pit one more time?" So they pit, but then it becomes a full safety car. The whole world becomes a full safety car, and I wrote, "Darn it," because Chuck got caught up by pitting under the VSC for his second stop, cost him a little more than under the full safety car. Max comes in, goes to softs, and this is where we said Lando now follows Oscar's move. He goes to hard. And Rob, you picked this up when they interviewed Zach. What did you think when they interviewed Zach about the hard tires?
He did not sound like he was confident at all. And I don't even know, I would even go as far as to say that his mouth might have been saying the words of, "Oh, it was a tight call. We're not sure. We kind of think that the data shows that the hards is the way to go." But really, the pitch of his voice was saying, "I think we've messed this up." But my gosh, we've got to eat humble pie, because other than a few moments where it probably took Lando a little time to get the heat into the tires, the restart, they did not get gobbled up like we thought they were going to. Max went real early on the restart. I wasn't expecting him to go that early. Well, actually, before thinking about the restart, I just realized something that made me chuckle when we were watching the safety car go around, that me and my son both made the same remark when the safety car went wide, and we said, "Oh, safety car's going to get done for track limits now." And then about 2 seconds later, the commentary team said the same thing as well. But anyway, safety car came in. Max is backing them up. It goes super early. Lando isn't paying attention at that point, and is Max has gone. I better accelerate as well. And I thought Lewis was going to get him then.
I did too.
But oh my gosh, we were treated to some epic back and forth with those two for about 2-3 laps maybe, where it really looked a number of times. And again, not DRS.
DRS kept him close. It was always on corners, on the high-speed corners. The two of them were battling inside, outside. Lewis trying the switcheroo, pulling up next to him. Lando just keeping his foot in it. Even at the end, in the cool-down room and in the interviews, Lewis talked about how much he enjoyed watching Lando's car as it's pulling away. He's like, "Good job, McLaren." I'm like, "You don't have to be that diplomatic, Lewis. It's okay."
He did. He said that it was through the corners, wasn't it? It was like through maggots and through those complexes that McLaren was just nailed. He could basically, Lando, I think, could just keep his foot to the floor all the way through that section, and Lewis had to back off a little bit. But
I was waiting for Toto to come over the radio with this one.
Lewis, the car is bad. We know. Please drive it.
Sorry, I just couldn't let that go from last week. He didn't complain at all.
But no, and then the car wasn't bad. But and then just as I thought that we were going to get the inevitable double overtake by the Mercedes, and my prediction last week of Max, Lewis, George on the podium was going to come true, those tyres started coming into the sweet spot for McLaren, and maybe they did know what they were talking about, and maybe we were the ones that were wrong, because Lando starts dropping Lewis. Those tyres come into the zone. I honestly think that decision was made to cement second, not go after Max. I think they knew if they'd have bolted the softs on and Lando got all feisty and maybe tried to chase him down, does he ruin those tyres before the end of the race, and Lewis gobbles him up? Don't know.
That's a good call. Because you had to choose something other than medium. So going soft, like on a soft tire, like you said, might have been more dangerous to hold on to second. Anyway, good battles. And then, the Ferrari team had left Carlos out. They had left the smooth operator out, and they'd found ways to. And they invented leave you out. We're going to go for track position and let you rock those rock-hard tires the whole rest of the way. And it looked to me like Carlos had forgotten where the gas pedal was. You ever take your foot off the pedal and you gotta find it again on a long road trip, and you put your shoe hits the brake a little, and then Carlos is passed by everybody, and the whole world just passes him. And one person, who was it first? Was it Perez? And then Alex. And then Chuck takes him, and then the gas man comes in for a sniff, all within 3 corners.
Within 3 corners, he lost 4 places. I think he managed to get the gas man back and redeem one spot, but it was like he was in. They always say you can't find reverse on these cars very easily when you're in the gravel track. Well, Carlos found it easily on those 3 corners. He just rocked it into reverse backwards.
And then,
I'd given up at this point, thinking Ferrari were going to do anything anyway, so I could almost see the comedy in it while they were just dropping back down down the field.
I mean, Ferrari finished 9th and 10th. No.
Just.
Yep, that's right.
Wasn't
9th and
it?
10th
No,
after
they
Alex.
clung on to that, I think.
That's 3 points they worked really hard to almost give away. And then the gas man, can we just say this real fast? Lance, again, a clanger of a weekend. He may be the pits. He's one of the pits options for the weekend. He came off the track, came flying back across, ran right into the side of the gas man, knocked him off, turned Pierre's rear wheel inward, and then they end up giving him a 5-second penalty for that. He completely ruined Pierre's race. It wasn't like he went over track limits or that it was like when De Vries pushed Magnussen off last week. It was just sort of a gentle push off and Magnussen comes and rejoins. He ran right into him, broke his car, and damaged in 5 seconds. There should be penalty points in my mind for that. That was that bad, in my opinion, but what do I know?
Yeah, he should have backed out of that. When they showed the replay, he comes out. He's obviously not going to make the corner. You just got to back out and then try to see, like they said, tuck back in behind and see if you can get him down the straight, not just ram into him. I mean, I think he should have been like 5-second stop and go or something to really kind of impact his race more as well. But yeah.
So then we get my last race note, Rob. Last race note for me. On lap 49 of the 52, they show the biggest droppers, wherever it started, ups and downs. The two biggest, with 5 spots lost each, were Charles and Carlos. Both Ferraris lost 5 spots. The only other person who lost more than 2 or 3 was Hulk, who'd lost 3 spots. And he'd started on hard tires and lost his wing and had to pit and completely ruin his strategy. And the Ferraris, I don't think, drove poorly. I wouldn't put anything on Charles or Carlos. It was the strategy backfired on. They pitted at the wrong time, a little bit of bad luck with the VSC, but man, it just did not come together for the Ferraris this weekend.
Oh, and I didn't think that was going to be your last note. I thought your last note was going to be the other one that I imagined you were getting exceptionally nervous at when, if Lando had the heartbreak in Sochi from the rain coming, when he got the black and white flag and like one more track limits is going to cost him 5 seconds, that takes him off the podium if that happens, right? So he is, home Grand Prix, looking at a very, very commendable second on the podium. That black and white flag comes out. I'm like, oh no, Lando, come on. I think it was Brundle said, just keep it inside the white lines. Just bring it home. Just do not do anything stupid now. And he didn't. And the roar when those guys, both him and Lewis, crossed the line to get 2 Brits on the podium at the British Grand Prix was just amazing. I may have been slightly hoping that was some sort of like last lap puncher for Max, and then he wouldn't win, and then we could get Lando winning. But do you know what? Fair play to Max. He did what he needed to do. He didn't disappear into the distance and win by 25 seconds. So maybe again it will be this track works well for McLaren. But if the others are starting to close the gap even a little bit, and we can get a little bit more, I know it took a safety car to scrunch it. He was like 9 seconds ahead, I think, by the time the safety car came out. But it still wasn't obscene amounts, and I don't think anybody got lapped. So
no, I don't think so either. I thought it was a great race.
Yeah,
we have some stats here, so we're recording again kind of quickly after the race as we did last week. And if there were track limit penalties applied that are happening right now that we don't know about, or 4 or 5 hours later in the day, let's hope not, and let's hope it's not Lando. But I do have some stats I'd like to highlight, and my buddy Mark sent me this to use. So Mark, this is for you. Sappity stats. Here we go, British GP edition, and we're recording quickly, so I made these. I did my best to get some good ones here. So Rob, you were right. 2 Brits on the podium. You'd said it was going to be Lewis and George, but we'll take Lando and Lewis. It was the first time at Silverstone with 2 Brits on the podium since '99. McLaren is the 6th constructor on the podium this season. That's great diversity of constructors on the podium so far. I think that's fantastic to hear. I mentioned this already. We had the Ferrari sandwich with Williams as the bread. Williams as the bread. That's how far Ferrari fell. Albon finished 8th, Chuck 9th, Carlos 10th, and Logan, the sergeant, 11th. What? Anyway, 6 wins in a row for Max. That ties him with Ascari, Schumi, Vettel, and Rosberg, Nico, for having 6 wins in a row. 14 podiums for Lewis at Silverstone. That's tremendous. 30 points harvested for McLaren today. 30. That's more than they had the entire rest of the season coming into today. It is the first, as we debated last week. The first proper British GP win for Max, but he also won the 70th anniversary race there. 11 race wins in a row for Red Bull, tying McLaren's constructors' record for race wins in a row. It's 11 consecutive podiums for Max. Obviously, Checo has a couple wins along the way there recently, and then this goes back into last year. And then 2010, since McLaren was on the podium at Silverstone with a gentleman named Lewis Hamilton driving for them back then. So, Rob, what did you think of the race?
I really enjoyed it. I think it was. I did not expect to be sitting here talking about the fact that two McLarens had formed the way that they did this weekend. It was very, very nice to see, very refreshing. I hope it's not a flash in the pan and it's not just that the Silverstone track kind of lent itself to that car well. It'd be nice to see that they... I don't expect them to be the best of the rest for the rest of the season now. I don't think we're going to say that this is it. McLaren have nailed it and they're now the one trying to take the fight to Aston. We'll probably see them having to work hard to keep Mercedes. I was going to say Ferrari, but that's probably a stupid thing to say. Aston, it's just nice to see them not trundling around at the back like they have for quite a few years now. They've been. I grew up watching McLaren win championships. I can't believe that's the same team, but I really hope they're on the way back, find themselves at the front a bit more now.
Well, let's hear a little bit from Pitlane Paul, who obviously knows a lot more than we do, about what he saw at the British Grand Prix.
Good evening. Just back home. It's amazing. Just back home after another Grand Prix. That don't happen too often. But only lived 10 minutes from Silverstone. And I fired up the motorbike, came in and out each day on that, which saves probably about 2 hours of sitting in traffic. And that was the British GP. It's one of the golden jewels on the calendar. I always say there's not many races that have the appeal in the fan attraction of Silverstone. 480,000 people over the weekend came in. It's just huge. It's huge. And then we had the filming for the movie, so they had the garage in the pit lane. It was all pretty good actually. They actually looked like a team. They looked really good, and it was unusual, but apart from that, I think the other 8 million people who seemed to be in the paddock, and it really was just a who's who of names, celebrities. My side is just too busy. It's chaos, but it sells. It's Formula One. It's popular. It's huge, and in fairness, they were treated to a pretty spectacular race. Let's start as always. Fridays don't count unless it's a sprint weekend. So we'll move on. Does anything good ever happen Friday? No. So let's just jump straight to Saturday. And then qualifying. Did it sort of go as we expected? I think it sort of did. Obviously, Perez. What's going on with that guy right now? It's and I know Helmut Marko has come out with some comments, as only Helmut Marko would, which I don't think is really helpful to a driver. I'm quite sure he's trying. I'm quite sure he's having a lot of bad luck. And I know we had the issue with Valtteri at the end of Quali 1, which I'm going to be honest with you guys, I'm not going to talk about just because it will make me beyond angry. So it's just easy to not say anything on that one. But yeah, we ran out of fuel. Long and short of it, no buttering that up. We ran out of fuel. It's a ridiculous error, and it's something that shouldn't happen at any standard of motorsport, let alone Formula One. So pretty shocking. I won't lie. Anyway, sorry, I said I weren't going to talk about it. Actually, if I do talk about it, I'm just going to get as angry and mad as I was yesterday. So I'm going to quickly move on to race day. And race day, the race was actually really good. I saw bits and bobs. I won't lie. I don't remember. I was running around quite a lot during the race, but I know there's quite a lot of stuff going on with some good battles. You know, the safety car that came out after the Haas issue, it's sort of spiced up. I mean, even the start with, you know, Lando getting a ridiculously good start, and then, I mean, it's only a matter of time before Max, needless to say, like, reeled him in and got past. But just what a performance. McLaren are, they're like Williams of British teams, you know. They're one of the to see them up there, it you know, it is good. It is encouraging. You know, Oscar Piastri, remember, it's his first season. What a drive from that lad. He got a little bit unlucky with a safety car that did come out. But to have a British Grand Prix with two British drivers on the podium is absolutely, you know, that's excellent. Max did what Max does. I mean, the interesting point with Max is that he didn't speed away into the distance as such. No, you don't read too much into that. Most drivers, they'll get, say, 2-3 seconds ahead, so they're not under any threat of DRS and just sort of like save the car, really, just drive it round. So I think there was quite a bit of that going on. But, you know, then again, Perez couldn't really come through the field as such and show the real pace of the car. So every team brought upgrades. Did they all work? Yes, arguably you could say it might have made things closer, but I think, you know, high-speed circuit like Silverstone, let's wait to Budapest next race. Tight and twisty, it'll be a decent show of what the cars can do. But apart from that, yeah, a good weekend. I'm glad it's over. Like I've said, just got back home. Look, it's Silverstone. You know, we say never change. It's such a brilliant event. It's such a brilliant race. It is, you know, no offense to the American races, but no one does racing like the UK and like Silverstone. That is for sure. It's so amazing. It looked amazing. I will end on one sore point. If anyone listened to the national anthem before the race, I mean, I'm going to say go listen to it because it's worth listening. If it's not worth listening, it's the worst abortion of a sort of song. I don't even know what to call it. But why do they allow these celebrity people to come on, especially an actor, and sing the national anthem? I don't get it. It's, you know, that's the national anthem viewed by 80-odd million people around the world, probably more. I don't know. Please, I mean, you guys, if you don't have it already and if you haven't covered it, please, for the love of your listeners, play it. And then let me know on Twitter exactly what you think of it. That would be fantastic. I'm embarrassed by it. So, guess embarrassment's only matched by Rob's inability to finish a pint. And I will speak to you after Budapest.
Awesome. Thank you, Paul. That was a great report, as always. You are the man. And interestingly enough, we've had a run of Dirty Siders at the races. Obviously, you heard a little bit about our time in Canada. Prior to that, JP was at Barcelona. And this week, Andy from the Discord server and from our preview episode and from our fantasy league, he was at the race. And we have some reports from Andy Friday, Saturday, and today. It helps if I hit the button.
Bingly, bingly, beep. It's Andy Tales with the Trackside Deets. So this is my Friday report from Silverstone. I had a great time today. Spent FP1 down at Beckett's. The car's all looking pretty good coming through the corners. The McLaren Chrome livery is pretty cool when the sun hits it and reflecting off it. Disappointed not to see many sparks come off the bottoms of the cars today. That's always something I enjoy seeing when I go to Beckett's, but oh well. FP2, I spent down at Club Corner. Lots of the cars were having oversteer moments as they came through the second part of the Rob Vale chicane. Personally, I'm wondering whether Pirelli have brought tyres that are a bit too hard or whether, you know, the drivers can't warm them up well enough. But we'll see how that goes on as the days go on.
Too hard.
Although today was the hottest day, so maybe it should have been easiest to warm the tyres. Let's see what happens tomorrow with the weather. It might be a bit wet, so we'll see what happens.
Thanks, Andy. Too hard, by the way. We'll just say this as we go through the reviews. He's right. He nailed it on Friday. Too hard in the compound in the rain.
I'm loving a shout out for the Vale chicane.
Oh, don't do that, Andy. Don't give Rob any credit. Let's hear his Saturday.
Bingly, bingly, beep. It's Andy Tales with the Trackside Deets. Saturday edition today. We got here early and went to the paddock entrance. Managed to get some autographs from Norris and Leclerc and a couple of other drivers. And then we headed to the village grandstand to watch F1 Practice 3. which was okay. A bit of rain at the end made it interesting. Watched the F2 sprint race from there as well. That was fantastic, great fun. And then, of course, it was the F1 qualifying session. Really good fun. Whenever any British driver topped the timesheets, everyone cheered, and that happened a lot because of the changing track. But obviously, we've ended up with Max on pole. Not a surprise there. Let's see what happens tomorrow in the race.
Andy, awesome.
He also mentioned on the Discord that he says he saw and said hello to Pitlane Paul. I hope it happened this way, where like as he's in position and trying to see drivers or what have you, that Paul walks past, and I just wanted Andy to, oh, and like all these people to be looking and thinking, who the heck's this guy? And like as he goes over and says hi to him, I'm just that's how I hope it happened in my head anyway. That we kind of made Pitlane Paul semi-famous.
I hope so too. I saw that as well on the Discord, and I actually asked Andy how did it go down, and he didn't answer because he's been busy going to and from the track. Yeah, and so then Andy will play your Sunday report here.
Bingly bingly beep, it's Andy Tales with the Trackside Deets. Sunday today, race day! We're at Woodcote Grandstand, which has a view down the Wellington DRS straight into the left hand of Brooklands, and then the long right of Luffield, a right kink of Woodcote, and then we could see a little bit down the National Pit Straight as well. Fantastic view, really enjoyed it. On to the race. Lando took the lead into the first corner. Massive cheers from everyone in the grandstand. Really, really happy to see our home favourite take the lead. I was also really impressed that he held Max up for a few laps, even a few laps where Max had the DRS. But the inevitable happened. Max took the lead and never lost it. Behind him, there was tension as to who was going to do the better tyre strategy, but it ended up looking like tyres didn't really matter that much, as nobody seemed to make much progress, even against cars on a worse tyre, apart from, of course, Carlos Sainz on his hard tyres, who dropped back quite badly at the end. 2 Brits on the podium, unfortunately not on the top step, but still a pretty decent result for the home crowd. That's it from me for this race. Hopefully I'll manage to record a few words for you when I visit Monza in a few races' time.
Thanks, Andy. Appreciate the reports, man. That's great. The Dirty Side has had in-person coverage at so many races recently. Just shows you what's happening. And speaking of what's happening, we did this so early again. Fantasy-wise, it's still calculating, as it says. But we do need to hit the Austrian GP and recap. It was a clanger of a week from, it was, I don't know, what's the British word that I should use? A disaster? In America, we'd call it an epic fail. But I was 57th. I do feel I acquitted myself okay. It's just that it was like, I can't even say the word I want to say. It was a points bonanza for people. The leader in our league had 508 points. And I know it was a sprint weekend, that's why. But a lot of people played the chips. 508. I had 364. That's a lot of points, 364. Nothing to sneeze at, but I still finished 57th on the week. And I fell to 11th in the league. It was a rough day. But to be honest with you, I don't even go back and look at results. I just put my team in every week. I still don't like this overtakes plus position gain double benefit. Checo's a great driver to have, even though he's in the pits every week. You shouldn't be boosting up Checo. He's not doing well. But again, you get overtakes and positions gained. So last week we had Red Bull catering funds first, tied with Zanetta Team 1, Vincendez 1, Much Mistaken, at F1 Fantasy Hub, that's our buddy Rob who comes on, FPL Instinctive, all tied at first with 508 points. Lord William II, our buddy from Twitter, 502. Machina, 494 in 8th. Gunter's Galacticos in 9th, and L Plan with 471 points in 10th. I couldn't get the standings because I forgot to do this until after quali this week, which screwed it up, so I didn't have the standings for the league after that. But remember, the winner of the first half, when we go to summer break, gets a t-shirt, and it is getting close. So everybody pay good attention for the last 2 races before summer break, because there is a Dirty Side t-shirt on the line.
Wow. I mean, that is like, I was going to say it's a money can't buy prize, but it can, because you can go onto our website and go to our merch shop and buy some if you want. But please do. It'd be great to see some more t-shirts rocking around, especially if you go into a race. I'd love to be able to be watching TV and see a Dirty Side t-shirt at the race. So, but yeah, so that kind of puts a bow around race weekend. I think it was an awesome weekend. The one thing we do have to hit, though, before we kind of finish putting the bow around it, is King of the Pits versus the pits. That resurfaced last week. It seems to have gone down well. So we're going to stick with it. So, are we both going to give King of the Pits to Lando?
Yes.
Yeah. So that one's just has to.
He was consistently good, right? I mean, he put in laps in quali that were, like you said, Q3 when he came through and put that in. You didn't think anyone could beat Max's lap that he put in first, and Lando did. And he was consistently on it. He was himself, too. He seemed very comfortable doing this. He was funny in the interviews. He ran a great race, even when he didn't like the hard tire decision. He took Max off the start. I mean, I don't know what else Lando could have done this weekend. So for me, King of the Pits, 100% agree.
100%. But what we did miss going through that was those radio exchanges where before the safety car restart, where he said, "So what's everyone on behind me?" Yeah, they're on. And the race engineer didn't want to tell him they were on softs, but knew he had to. So he really tried to overemphasize they're on used, like really old softs, Lando. Like, oh man, they're so used. You won't believe how used these softs are. And he just went something like, we're on the hards. Lovely. I'm pretty sure he said the word lovely. And I was like, oh, man.
He did.
But that was, so what about the pits? Who was the pits today?
I mean, well, again, it's for the weekend, so it's not just race day.
Well, okay, yeah, but who's your pits holder this week?
Lance. I wanted to go with Checo, but I got to go with Lance. He had a clanger of a weekend. Whatever he could screw up, he did, it felt like.
Yeah. I was torn between either him or Checo as well, because Checo just for me is 5 times man, but kind of redeemed himself a little bit. Got fairly high up the charts, but not where he should have been in that car. So
well, Checo finished 6th. Everyone thought he had a podium shot. He only made it up to 6th, and he had a safety car to help him bunch everybody up to attack from.
Yeah, true.
So
true.
I would say Checo was a deserving pits, but I would give it to Lance. I mean, and he just didn't acquit himself well in quali. He still had a big gap teammate to teammate, and I know he got the penalty, which I still think was gentle. Fernando was 7th, and Lance was down in 14th, and probably should have been even lower. Given the gentleness of that penalty. So, I think we're both agreed, right? Checo and Lance were the pits?
Yeah, I'm going to use this get out of jail card. I've been holding it for a while now, right? So we all remember me saying that Lance was
third best driver on the grid.
Yep. But I still say, go back and listen to that next episode. When I said it, I said, at this moment.
You did.
Will he hold on to it in a few races' time? Only time will tell. And that answer is, no, he hasn't.
No, he hasn't.
He absolutely hasn't. I still think that he's a much better driver. This whole, daddy's boy, he's only in F1 because his dad runs the team. Maybe it's true that that's how he got in, but he is still, it's not like he's Latifiing it around the back.
Oh, agree, 100%.
So he's a good driver. He's just not covering himself in glory at the moment. And today, I think you said, what was the word you used for it? What's
clanger?
Your choice? No, that's not what you said earlier on. Whatever the word you used was absolutely right. So he gets the pits.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's the British Grand Prix. This week as well, we also managed to catch up with Jake, who we bumped into, him and his dad at the Canadian Grand Prix. We kind of strong-armed him into coming on the show, which is what I think I say in the intro now. So, let's take a listen into how we got on to talking to Jake as he took on the 100 Seconds of DRS.
Box.
Okay, it's been a while since we've done one of these, and this time we had to go all the way to Canada and force somebody in person to show up and come on the 100 Seconds of DRS. So, really nice to see you again after meeting you in person. Jake, welcome to the Dirty Side.
Nice to see you guys as well. Thank you so much for having me on and sending me the invite in person. So, yeah.
It was a pleasure meeting you in person, and the best part is it confused Rob, right? So we're in Montreal at the Canadian GP. We'll talk about that in a second. But we realized that you and I have lived not far from where you are now, in Florida. So as Rob is learning, basically all F1 fans have done a stint in the Tampa area.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yep. I'm probably, 15, 20 minutes from your house right now, probably?
Probably. It's about right. It's about right.
It was a double whammy of kind of like shocked faces, because first off, when you guys mentioned where you were from, Brian's face goes, no way! Like, I was from blah, 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 and throws out whatever the world's smallest school is that he went to, that everybody in the world seems to have gone to, which was then followed up by my shocked face of, yet another person that we meet who has basically lived in Brian's hometown. It's just, it's insane, this tiny little place. It's like, I don't know, it's like Stranger Things or something. It's like the epicenter of the universe or something.
Well, first of all, not everyone went there. They're just familiar with Tarpon Springs High School, home of the Spongers. So, it's like you got to know about it. It's so strange. But anyhow. So Jake, obviously we got a chance to meet you and your father down up in Montreal. Had a chance to go to the GP. That was, as we talked about, Rob and I, it was our first time. But tell us about your experience at the Canadian GP.
Well, one, it was a wet experience, as we know.
Wet.
It was fun though. Never experienced any motorsport event in any sort of rain, so that was kind of new to me. We actually didn't even go on Friday just because we got into Montreal around like noon, and there really wasn't much going on. And with all the FPs getting a little mixed up with electrical and weather and whatnot, so just kind of explored the city there. Never been to Montreal before, so. And then at the GP, my only ever prior Formula One event is going to Miami, and it couldn't really have been more drastic in the differences. It was a proper real track with history versus a parking lot where it's 90,000 degrees in Florida. And I don't know. I loved everything about it. I think just for me, just being at a proper track other than, Miami and, actually being somewhere where everyone pretty much in the F1 world loves, and just kind of being able to say I've been there, and just kind of even like, where I was sitting, like, I mean, my grandstand seats were better than they were in Miami. I saw more action, and overall, it was just a great weekend, and been reliving it in my head over and over again, and listening to you guys relive it in your head makes me relive it in my head. So
we've actually had a couple people who have done the 100 Seconds of DRS and listened to the pod reach out and say that us talking about how exciting it was, and again, for our first time, and I know, as you said, you'd done Miami, but people are like, I got to go now. I got to book tickets, and they want to go to Canada, partially because of, like you said, it's a real track with history, and it's a lot cheaper than Miami.
Mm-hmm. No, definitely cheaper than Miami. You got the history, and you don't have to hear in every podcast or every video after that, oh, Miami this, Miami that, the fake water, the track has no history, it's in a parking lot. You kind of feel bad. You're like, oh, I went to that race. So now I get to say that I went to now I get to say that I went to a Canadian GP where everyone's, throwing, happy faces at it versus, thumbs down. So, yeah.
Awesome.
I wanted to ask about that actually, because I got to be honest, I'd had a couple of beers when we spoke to you in person, so I'm not sure if I already asked you this, so apologies if I did. Like, I felt that walking around Canada, you could literally stop anybody and just start talking to them about F1, because it was like kindred spirit underneath every cap or every bit of merch. You could just talk about anything, right? The fact, the same way that we struck up conversation with you and your dad, it was just easy. Was it the same vibe at Miami, or is, because at the end of the day, it's still F1 fans all hanging out. It's just, you got that whole sense of people looking to be down on the venue, whereas in Canada, the venue doesn't even crop up as a kind of topic of conversation because everyone loves it. So just wondered if there was a different vibe.
The vibe, I would say, is a little bit different. I would say there was a lot more, at least from my perspective and talking to people and seeing people, it was a lot more global in Miami. There was a lot more. With Canada, I kind of felt it was a lot of Canadians, and then it was a lot of Americans. And there was obviously, sorry.
Well, I mean, Rob's an honorary American at this point.
Okay, yeah. Thanks, yeah.
And in Miami, it was just, I felt it was more global. It was more international, and there was somewhat of a language barrier to sometimes people. And I think the Canadian GP it was just set up a little bit better in the fact of there was more places to kind of like socialize and kind of, I mean, you're not there to just socialize, you're there to also watch the race, but there was more like things going on with that. Miami was just a little bit more like, I kind of felt like the only way you could kind of socialize was if you wanted to spend thousands of more extra dollars to socialize.
Right.
And the other thing in Miami, so many Checo fans being in that Latin American area, you definitely heard more Spanish. So that, maybe swayed me a little bit from, talking to a random group of people, and, I'm hearing a bunch of Spanish and they're decked out in Red Bull gear while I have, a Ferrari hat on. So, but overall though, yes, that is one thing that I've noticed, going to F1 races versus, going to like an IndyCar race, for example, is you can leave that F1 event and it's just like, wow, like I just talked to someone from here, or wow, I just made a connection with this person here. And it's just like, it's such a global sport that, it still amazes me to this day how cool it is that you can just meet people from all over the world at this one little spot and you all have the same idea to come do the same thing at the same time. And yeah, so yeah.
I totally agree, Jake. And the multicultural aspect is tremendous and just a great value add, if you will, to the experience. Although some of us, me, struggled with my rudimentary French. And so I was telling this to Rob, I don't think this was on. I can't remember if I said this on here, but I was trying to use my, few French sayings along the way when we were at other places. And after, far too many Heinekens at the track and other beverages along the way, Spanish started coming out. And I don't know why. And so, because that's like the only language I really know well. And so I'm apologizing to people in Spanish. And I'm like, it was a mess.
Mine was trying to pronounce French words, and it sounded like I was pronouncing them with a Spanish accent. I don't know if it's because they're both kind of like a, similar language in a way, or, I don't know what it was, but it all just became Spanish to me when I was trying to pronounce that.
Me too.
So I kind of just like tried to not speak any French.
I tried to just not speak is what I was doing by the end.
The real yardstick for this is the funniest thing is that back home my wife was a French teacher, and she will always give me grief for how poor my French is. If we ever went on vacation to France, I'd sort of shrink into the background and push her forward and make her do all the speaking. When we got back from the weekend, I said to her, "You're never going to believe this. Out of me and Brian, I was the fluent one."
Oh man, it was a disaster. The highlight for me was realizing that KFC in Montreal is PFK, and I thought that was hilarious. I couldn't get enough of it. Every time we drove by it in our area we were, I'm like, PFK. Anyway. Oh, so obviously, we got a chance to chat at the Canadian GP, and got some of your background and some of your stories there, and had a blast listening to Martin Garrix, or however we're supposed to pronounce the DJ's name, who was fantastic in the Heineken area. But what is kind of your background? Because you said you talked a lot about different motorsports as a fan. How'd you get into motorsport, and how'd you get into F1 out of curiosity? We always enjoy hearing people's kind of, origin story.
This is a kind of a long story, not that long, but I'll try to make it fast. So I grew up in Columbus, Ohio. I didn't live in Florida my entire life, as many people don't.
Right. I didn't. I would move there from Milwaukee.
So I lived in Columbus, Ohio, and the Midwest, Indiana, Ohio has a huge IndyCar, world, and there's a lot of teams based in Indianapolis, which is like 3 hours from Columbus. Ray Hall Letterman Racing used to be based in Hilliard, which is about 30 minutes from where I lived. And Mid-Ohio, which is a pretty, I would say, famous IndyCar track, was about 40 minutes north of my house. And my grandpa was always big into racing. Grandpa and grandma were always big into racing. I don't know how they got into it, but they always were kind of big into it. And he was actually a field marshal at Mid-Ohio. So, he was always mixed around racing, mostly IndyCar and, sports car racing, and then NASCAR. But when I was little, I would go over to their house, and, my grandma would always watch me, and Sunday night would come along, and NASCAR, IndyCar, always on TV. She was the biggest Juan Pablo Montoya fan. I don't know why, but she loved Juan Pablo Montoya. I might be wrong. I think his NASCAR was sponsored by Target. I could be wrong, but I remember just Target hats and Target shirts. Holy, it's Juan Pablo Montoya. I don't know why. I don't know what it was about Juan Pablo Montoya, but she loved him in NASCAR because that was right before he was done. I mean, he went from all the series, Formula One, Indy, and then went to NASCAR. And
right.
So I always just grew up watching NASCAR. And then as I got older, getting into middle school and high school, I kind of stopped paying attention a little bit to motorsports. But I always kind of still loved cars and had a passion for competitiveness and just cars in general. And then one day I was up early watching the English Premier League because I do really enjoy watching European, I'm going to say soccer, sorry, but in my eyes, it's soccer. And I'm a big West Ham fan, once again, sorry.
That's okay.
I think I remember you saying you were an Arsenal fan, maybe.
Yep.
You'll get Declan Rice. Hopefully you don't, but if you do.
I think they're going to announce him tomorrow. We record this on Thursday night, and I think Declan Rice is an Arsenal player on Friday, so that would be great.
Thanks for the 110 million. That's going to be useful. Anyways,
I have no idea what you guys are talking about.
I know, it's brilliant.
I was up early watching English soccer, and I saw F1 on, and I obviously knew what F1 was. I've watched it before, but I was never really that involved in it. And I watched my first full F1 race, and I was like, oh, wow, okay. The cars are way cooler, than IndyCar and NASCARs. And I could just kind of tell that it was just like a higher class. Like you can just tell like on TV, you can tell in person, like it was just like a little bit step farther than, IndyCar, NASCAR, and other, endurance racing series and whatnot. And I kind of just got hooked. And that was about a year and a half, I'd say about maybe 2 years before Drive to Survive came out.
Oh, okay.
And I was pretty big into it. I wouldn't get up every morning to watch every F1 race, but like if it was a race that was on at like a reasonable time, I'm getting up and I'm watching it. I'd watch qualifying on Saturday. I would keep up and whatnot. And then Drive to Survive came out, and I was like, oh, wow, okay. So there's way more that goes into it than I thought. I loved all the behind-the-scenes stuff, and that just kind of propelled me forward. And then, yeah, just became a huge fan. My dad wasn't that big of a fan, but we got lucky with the lottery and were able to get the draft lottery tickets for the Miami GP. And my dad went, not being a fan pretty much at all. I was a pretty huge fan at that point. And he saw the cars in person, got hooked, and then a year later, we're, getting tickets to Montreal, and we're already planning our next GP. So,
what are you guys thinking for the next one?
And it reels you in. So
it totally does. Like I can't agree with you more. Like that's the same sentiment. I've gone once to an F1 race, and I'm trying to figure out where the next one is. Like, what's the next one I can afford to make happen, and how soon can it be? Because I need to get that, direct line in IV into my bloodstream of another race weekend. So, like, what are you guys thinking? Do you have any ideas in terms of what might be next?
We want to do all the North American, mostly probably Austin. We want to stay away from Vegas until we see exactly how Vegas goes.
Yeah.
And if we can even afford Vegas, because
right.
Be real, Vegas is not going to be cheap. We're really looking at Austin, and he really wants to go to Silverstone if we ever could. And then for some reason, Hungary would be really cool too.
Yeah.
Austin's probably going to be the next one that we do. And then after that, probably Silverstone and then maybe Hungary. But Austin's probably next October for us if we're going to be realistic and not, dream about going to every race every weekend. Having our own private jet and flying wherever we want to go.
Well, if you go to the British GP, just tell everybody you know Rob. He's a big wig over there.
Will do.
Oh, they got a corner named after me, so it's all good. Yeah.
Yeah, sure they do.
They do. Like I said, you show me the racetrack that's got a corner named after you, Brian, and I'll be quiet.
All right, I'm working on it. Let me pencil it in on a racetrack around here somewhere.
Actually, maybe, the Vegas track isn't finished yet. I'm sure if you cough up enough bucks, you can sponsor a corner. It won't cost you much, honest.
Yeah. I could tell you what's happened to me at some of the corners on the Vegas track, but I don't think that's going to be named after me. Oh, man.
Okay, so the big pressure moment is arriving, Jake. We've eased you in. We've got you into a sweet spot talking about F1, but are you ready to face the most daunting challenge in all of F1, which is the 100 seconds of DRS?
I am ready, yes.
Well, you've drawn the short straw, some would say, that Brian is timing you. But you've got lucky because that means I'm asking the questions.
I was wondering where you're going with that. All right, so then if I'm running the timer, which we have finally learned to do after a season of doing this, I will start with Rob. Are you ready to ask the questions?
Yes, I am.
Jake, are you ready for the 100 seconds of DRS?
I'm ready.
We will start in 3, 2, 1, begin.
First poster you had on your bedroom wall?
Sports Illustrated, USA beating Russia in the Olympics for hockey.
Best F1 driver on the grid currently?
Currently, Max Verstappen.
What's your favorite cheese?
Favorite cheese? Provolone.
Favorite F1 track?
F1 track? Montreal.
Yes. Ferrari or Ford?
Ferrari. Well,
Mario.
I scratched that. Ford.
Okay, Ford. Mario or Luigi?
Luigi.
Is a hot dog a sandwich?
Yes.
If you were in the pit crew, which tyre would you change?
Back left.
If you could add a James Bond style gadget to an F1 car, what would it be?
The guns that shoot out the side, because that'd be cool.
Favorite musician or musical group?
Calvin Harris.
Sleep in or get up early?
Get up early.
Favorite livery of all time on an F1 car?
Ooh, the McLaren cigarette one.
Do you have any lucky superstitions?
Lifting my feet up if I drive over a track.
Oh.
Wet or dry race?
Dry.
Would you rather be chased by 1 horse-sized duck or 10 duck-sized horses?
10 duck-sized horses.
Favorite non-F1 sport?
Ice hockey.
Which 2 drivers from different eras would you like to see go head-to-head?
Lewis Hamilton and Senna.
If you could swap the cars out for different types of transportation, what would they be?
Double-decker bus.
Moustache or mullet?
Mullet.
New Year's Eve, big deal or nothing burger?
Nothing burger.
All right, and we hit time. We hit time.
Oh.
Agreed. It's a nothing burger. You did fantastic, Jake. You aced it.
Tried.
I've just got to back up to one. What's the superstition? You got to lift your feet.
So there's a railroad track, right? It's bad luck if you don't lift your feet up while you're driving over the tracks. I don't know. Always been told it is.
So what? You have to take your feet off the pedal. You accelerate to get enough momentum going, then feet off the pedal so you can coast over the railroad. Feet up.
Just feet up real fast. I personally think you want good luck if you're driving. So as soon as I heard that, I was like, you probably don't want bad luck if you're driving. So
might as well do it. Yeah.
And then with the Ford versus Ferrari one, I kind of thought of the movie in my head. The Ford versus Ferrari back, at Le Mans, and I was like, I'm American. I can't say Ferrari over Ford. So
you are sitting there wearing a Ferrari hat, so I would have forgiven you.
I am wearing a Ferrari hat, so it's kind of weird right now. But yeah.
I got in a conversation with someone at work, and Ford came up, and they said, the nice thing about Ford is they've circled the problem. It's a circular emblem, and the Ford is it.
Chevy driver.
Yeah. So even before we got to 100 seconds, something you mentioned, the wet, because then Rob asked wet race, dry race. But remembering the wet of Saturday, I watched some of the NASCAR this last weekend in Chicago, and I'm sitting there on Saturday. I watched a little bit, and then they had to pause it, and I tuned out. And it turns out I didn't miss anything. And then I tuned in Sunday, and it's raining, and I see all these people in their emergency ponchos, and I'm thinking to myself, I did that for a day plus, and I never want to do that. I don't ever, but I prefer not to do that again anytime soon. The feeling of 4-cent plastic stuck to your body for an entire day, nothing wrong with it, but I knew exactly what those people were going through.
Yeah, same. It does add a little excitement, watching the drivers struggle a little bit out there and, getting close to losing it. But you could tell on Sunday the cars were just drastically faster. You could just tell that you were seeing the full performance of the car, when on Saturday you're not seeing the full performance of the car. You may be seeing the full performance of the driver, but you're not seeing the full performance of these, absolute beasts of machinery. So that was kind of the one thing that I noticed on Sunday, just how much faster they were.
Totally agree.
Did you when you talked about differences in beasts of machinery, what really kind of sort of rammed it home for me was, did you hang around and watch any of the F1600, the smaller open wheel series?
I did not.
Because watching those guys go down the straight and you could almost move your neck in slow motion and go, there it goes, nice. And they're still doing 120, but literally you had to get whiplash trying to watch the F1 cars go past. I mean, it was just incredible to see the difference in speed being there in person. It was just amazing.
It was the same with the Ferrari challenge right there. Ferrari.
Yeah.
I mean, those are supercars on the street and then jacked up to be race cars, and they're still just so much slower looking and even slower sounding. I mean, it's just with the F1 cars, you can just hear you can just hear everything. You can just hear how fast they are. You can hear the downforce. It's just you can't really describe it over. You just have to kind of hear it and see it with your own eyes.
Exactly, which is why I got to go back soon.
Got to go back.
Got to
go back. The direct comparison, because obviously you had to try to remember those different series on track. The one thing that really got me was when the safety car goes around first and does a flying lap before all the cars come out, and you're watching that souped up Aston flying past as hard as it can, and that thing is shifting, and even that just looks like it's just going in reverse when the F1 cars are out.
It really looks like a toy car compared to these F1 cars.
Yeah. Well, Jake, thank you so much, man, for agreeing to join us on the 100 Seconds of DRS. Thanks for listening to the pod since we met you so recently. And, it's always great to connect with other fans. That's what this is for Rob and I, just to enjoy talking F1 with other fans. And that's all we are, is just a couple fans. And we really, really appreciate you joining us today.
Yeah. Thank you so much. I had a blast. I kind of messed up that Ford versus Ferrari, but
No, you didn't.
my country when I was down on me.
Well, but if you're going to say that Ford was the right answer for your country, then you came out, you passed the test in the week of the 4th of July. You've passed the test. You're going to be this will be strapped onto the end of the Silverstone review this weekend. So go tell all your friends to listen, get some more listeners over to the dirty side, and none of them will give you any grief because you picked the right one at the end of the day.
Will do. Exactly.
Thanks, Jake.
Thank you.
Box.
Right, that's great to have a DRS guest back on again. I think we've got a couple more lined up in the pipeline. So I love people coming on. So just I don't say do what he did, because that was bumping into us in a beer garden in Canada, which is probably kind of a very specific way of getting on 100 Seconds of DRS. But just drop us a DM on Twitter or email us, just get in contact and come on, because we love having people on. I think it's fantastic.
We do have a couple people lined up that we're going to make sure we do that. We have some scheduling, Rob and I, calendar challenges coming up shortly. But interestingly, Martin Brundle, if you go back to Spain, he's interested too.
You do wonder if DRS shouldn't be limited to, 100 seconds per race.
Martin Brundle's thinking about 100 seconds of DRS as well. And Martin, we don't limit our 100 seconds. If we go a tiny bit over, we're fine.
Brilliant. I thought you picked up something else, because friend of the show, not Andy that was at the race day, but Andy that does the music for us quite frequently and does the Pitlane Paul jingle. He sent me a message saying, "Are you watching?" Because Martin Brundle just mentioned about being on the dirty side of the track. He said, but it would have been an amazing soundbite to use. But just as he was saying the word track, someone's wheel gun went off and kind of blurred over it. But he said dirty side of the track.
Karun also did say dirty side of the track, but it was early and I didn't catch it. Anyway, so yeah, that was a great 100 seconds. Jake, thanks for joining us. And also, I appreciate the fact, as I said, that you're a West Coast of Florida guy, like so many people are. Renato and Justin and so many people have come on recently and have that Tarpon Springs, Clearwater, Palm Harbor.
Will you stop
St. Pete
going
area.
on about this?
Yeah, baby.
Oh my
That's
gosh.
how it works.
So anyway, we're going to have to wrap this up now, because I can't
Do
listen
it.
to him talk about that
Done.
anymore. So if you want to get on the Discord, we put the link to the Discord server and the show notes every single week. So you just click on there and come join us. We have some great fun. We got our question of the day that Andy is. I don't know what the word is. He's our quizmaster at the moment, right?
Yeah,
He's our quizmaster.
JP has been doing a great job, but had to step away briefly. JP, we're thinking about you, man. Hope all's well. But Andy's been doing that. It's awesome. The Discord is a ton of fun. Great opportunity to make fun of Rob as much as you like, which is what I use it for.
Well, yeah, true, but I think I am beating you all the time in the question
Well,
of the day
I submit
thing. Anyway,
one or two a week.
Never mind. Moving on. So make sure I was going to say follow, and share us on Twitter and Instagram, but now we need to add Threads to that as well. So get over on Threads and see how that one goes down. We're not sure what we've got next week. We might have a special edition Pitlane Paul episode. We're not 100% sure. Again, we've got to work through some calendar issues. But other than that, we will definitely have something next week. Just not sure what it is yet. So hopefully you will tune in next time and listen to us.
Sounds great. Have a great week, everybody. Talk to you soon.